Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into some, well, really fundamental questions, aren't we? Who am I? And maybe even more complicated, who gets to decide?
Exactly. And these questions get incredibly complex, even controversial when we talk about racial identity, especially in a world that often seems stuck on these really rigid categories.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our mission for this deep dive is to explore this concept, transracialism. It's where individuals identify with a race that's different from the one they were assigned at birth.
And this isn't just some abstract theory, right? It affects real people. It challenges beliefs many of us hold quite deeply. We'll be looking at this through a whole range of sources.
We will, and we're especially going to focus on individuals like Donna Briggs, really asking that tough question. Can society actually allow for, say, a black woman to be a white woman?
It's a central question. We've got academic papers, YouTube clips, personal stories, even some pretty intense Reddit threads. It's definitely nuanced.
For sure. And look, the goal here isn't to find some easy answer. It's about unpacking all these complexities, getting you informed quickly so you can grapple with it yourself.
Right. And to do that properly, we probably need to start with the basics, like how we even think about race in the first place.
Okay, so that common idea, the one many of us grew up with, is that race is fixed, biological, in our genes, set in stone. But does the science actually back that up?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The scientific consensus now,
Mm.
it overwhelmingly challenges that idea. Biologically speaking, these fixed races, they just don't really exist in the way we think.
No distinct biological races.
Not in that clear-cut way.
Right.
The Human Genome Project was huge for this. It showed there's actually more genetic variation within the groups we call races than between them.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no single gene, that only one population has. And think about physical traits. Skin color, hair texture. They don't just stop at some imaginary border. They blend gradually across geographic areas.
Right, like a spectrum.
Exactly. Scientists call it clinal variation. And, critically, different traits don't always stick together. Somebody might have skin tone associated with one group, but hair texture with another. That's non-concordant variation. It basically dismantles the whole idea of neat biological boxes.
So if it's not strictly biological, not genetic in that way, where did our modern concept of race actually come from? How did it get so ingrained?
That's the historical angle.
Yeah.
And it's pretty heavy. The modern idea of race really took shape during European exploration, colonialism, the scientific revolution, I think 16th to 18th centuries.
Okay.
And the uncomfortable truth, the insight from looking back, is that race wasn't really discovered. It was constructed, engineered, you could almost say.
It's engineered. How so?
Early classifiers, people like Linnaeus and Blumenbach, started creating these hierarchies. They used physical traits, even things like skull shape, to justify power structures, to justify colonialism, and crucially, the subordination of African slaves.
So it was about power and control from the start.
Very much so. That history is baked into the concept. It's not just some old footnote. It shapes how race functions today. By the 1970s, anthropology textbooks mostly stopped talking about biological races. Some sources flat out say race is socially dysfunctional and biologically indefensible.
That's a huge shift to realize these deep beliefs are more history than biology. And we see this play out differently in different places, right? Like how race is understood isn't the same everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Brazil.
Yeah.
Historically, they've had a much more fluid system. Dozens of racial categories, often based more on how someone looks than strict ancestry.
Okay, very different.
And contrast that with the U.S. and the historical one-drop rule.
Mm.
Any known African ancestry made someone legally black. Period. Super rigid. Talk about policing identity.
Yeah, that's incredibly strict.
But even the U.S. has changed, shifted a bit. The 2000 census was a big moment. People could choose more than one racial identity for the first time.
And did they?
Yeah, significantly. About 53% of kids with one white and one black parent were identified with both races. That suggests a real move towards recognizing mixed identities, at least formally.
So it shows how the social idea of race can evolve even if the biology hasn't changed.
Precisely. Biological variation is real, of course, but the meaning we attach to it, the categories we create, that's social. And that, I think, really sets the stage for why this idea of transracialism is so challenging.
It really does. Because if race isn't this fixed biological thing, but it's built on social meaning and history, then someone identifying with a different race, transracialism, it hits differently, doesn't it?
It does. And people
Yeah.
often compare it to transgender identity, which has, gained more societal understanding, relatively speaking.
Right. How does that comparison hold up? What are the similarities people draw?
Well, the core similarity often pointed out is that internal sense of self. Both
Yeah.
involve feeling that your internal identity doesn't align with the category you were assigned at birth. Sex for transgender individuals, race for transracial individuals.
So like gender dysphoria, some might feel a kind of racial dysphoria.
That's the term some use, yes.
Yeah.
A distress from that mismatch, leading them to want to align their outward presentation or life with their internal racial identity.
Yeah.
To bridge that gap, essentially.
Okay, I can see the parallel on an individual internal level, but the public reaction, the acceptance, it seems vastly different. Why is transracialism so much more contentious?
That's where the comparison often breaks down for critics. A key argument, like Simon Cushing makes, is about intergenerational oppression. Race, especially for groups like Black people or Indigenous people, is tied to a shared history of systemic injustice.
Things like slavery, residential schools, ongoing discrimination.
Exactly. The argument is, can someone who hasn't inherited that specific historical trauma and lived experience genuinely claim membership in that group simply by feeling they belong? That's a major point of friction.
And there's the biology argument too, right?
Yeah.
Or lack thereof.
Yes, Professor Day, for instance, points out that while gender identity is complex, there's growing evidence for neurochemical or biological underpinnings. Race, as we've established, is overwhelmingly seen by science as a social construct without that kind of biological basis. So it's not quite a direct analogy in that sense either.
And what about just societal pushback, concerns about appropriation?
Yet huge. Transgender identities, while still facing massive challenges, have gained more acceptance, more established pathways, medical and social. Transracial identity faces intense skepticism, often hostility.
Why the hostility?
A lot of it centers on fears of cultural appropriation, of trivializing the lived realities of racism, especially with Black identity, which some sources say is now more closely policed, precisely because of a history of appropriation. Think Rachel Dolezal, or debates around white artists and Black music genres.
So there's a feeling of needing to protect the identity.
Perhaps. And there just aren't accepted transition pathways for race, like there are for gender. Cases like Martina Big, the white model who used extreme tanning injections and surgery to appear Black, those often spark intense backlash and questions about authenticity versus appropriation.
This complexity, this controversy, it brings us right to the individual we wanted to focus on, Donna Briggs. Her case seems to embody so many of these tensions. Tell us about her.
Right. Donna Briggs. She wasn't just anyone. She was, for a time, a well-known Black radio host. Successful career, interviewed huge names, Jennifer Hudson, Bobby Brown, R. Kelly, Tyler Perry, Wendy Williams. A really long list. A respected figure in media.
Okay, so a public figure, clearly identified and successful as a Black woman.
Yeah,
then
came a major shift. Her current public persona is, well, it's drastically different. She now publicly identifies as a white woman with a tan.
a white woman with a tan.
That's her description. And it's not just a private feeling, it's how she presents herself online. She even changed her standard video intro to, "Hello everyone, it's Donna Briggs," which accompanies this new identity claim.
So how does this connect to that core question? Can a Black woman be a white woman in society's view? What does her story tell us about that?
What shows the resistance, really. Society, based on her appearance, her history, unequivocally identifies her as Black. But she persistently doubles down on claiming a white identity. She argues with commenters about it. So it's less about society accepting her switch and more about her asserting an identity that society largely refuses to validate. She becomes this really stark, controversial example of someone attempting to live transracially against the grain.
What are the perceived motivations behind this, and how are people reacting, especially given her public profile?
It's complicated. One source we looked at, the Brittany Simon podcast, suggests it might be less about intentional grifting, scamming people, and more indicative of a potential mental health crisis or even spiritual psychosis.
Why that interpretation?
It's based on observing what they call her ungroundedness. Things like promoting questionable business ventures, a nonprofit, children's books that got flagged as scams. There are examples of her giving advice that seems really detached, like telling a homeless mother to give up her kids.
Wow.
Yeah. And her public admiration for figures like Elon Musk, her alignment with the abundance mindset crowd, that's seen by this source as potentially linking to being susceptible to conspiracy theories. Vaccines are bad, raw milk, that sort of thing. The idea being, perhaps, that some in that sphere might be less likely to seek conventional help when needed.
So observers are seeing signs of distress rather than a calculated identity shift.
That's the perspective presented in that source, yes.
Mhm.
Her online presence, reportedly filled with bot comments and this perceived unwellness. It paints a picture less of a successful manipulator and more of someone potentially needing support or medical intervention.
Has there been any intervention?
The sources imply family and friends might have tried, but unsuccessfully. It's a really difficult situation, and it stands in stark contrast to someone like Michael Jackson.
How so?
Well, Michael Jackson underwent dramatic physical changes, but he always publicly affirmed his pride in being black. He attributed the changes to vitiligo, a medical condition. Donna Briggs is actively, publicly denying her black identity and claiming whiteness. That persistent denial is what makes her case so challenging for societal understanding and acceptance of race. It highlights just how difficult, maybe impossible it is within our current framework for a black woman to simply become a white woman in the eyes of others.
It's a really challenging case. Okay, let's zoom out again. Beyond Donna Briggs, what are the wider implications? The ethical stuff, the societal impact of transracial identity, it touches on some big nerves, clearly.
Oh, definitely. A major one is cultural appropriation versus genuine appreciation. It's a very fine line and often contested.
How does that play out?
When people try to change their race, especially physically, hair dye, makeup, extreme tanning like Martina Big, or surgeries like Ollie London, trying to look. Korean critics see it as taking cultural elements without understanding their meaning or respecting the history. It can feel like playing dress up, trivializing the struggles tied to that identity.
Right. Ignoring the systemic issues attached to how you look.
Exactly. And that connects to lookism, discrimination based on appearance, and colorism, which is discrimination based on skin tone, often favoring lighter skin within or across racial groups.
Like the historical brown paper bag tests.
Precisely. Those clubs only admitted people lighter than a paper bag. It shows how deeply ingrained valuing certain looks can be. So the uncomfortable question arises. Are some people identifying as a different race, partly because they've internalized these harmful societal biases that privilege certain appearances?
And what about the impact on movements for racial justice, if race becomes just a personal choice?
That's a huge concern for many activists and scholars. If race is purely individual choice, does that weaken the foundation for things like Black History Month or arguments for reparations? These are based on shared history, collective identity, and systemic oppression.
Right, they're about a group experience, not just individual feeling.
Exactly. One source made the pointed comment about Michael Brown, the young black man killed in Ferguson, saying he couldn't be transracial. His race was imposed on him with fatal consequences. It highlights how race is often not a choice, especially for marginalized groups.
So there's this real tension. Individual autonomy, the right to define oneself, maybe even alter one's body, morphological freedom is a term used, versus the collective identity and historical struggles of a group.
That's the crux of it. How do you balance the individual's sense of self with the weight of collective history and ongoing inequality? Many transracial adoptees, for example, feel the idea of choosing a race can erase their complex experiences of navigating racism while being raised by parents of a different race. It's seen by some as opting into an identity without the inescapable baggage.
And looking ahead, technology seems poised to make these questions even more complicated, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The future possibilities are pretty mind-bending. Think about genome editing.
Yeah.
What if you could actually alter physical traits associated with race, skin color, hair texture?
Wow.
It forces us to ask, what fundamentally makes us who we are? Would our current racial categories even make sense anymore? The ethical questions are massive. Who gets access? Would it create new divides?
And virtual reality, AI.
Yeah, we can already create digital avatars of any race. That further blurs the lines between our physical selves and our presented identities. Our true self becomes even harder to pin down. It just adds layers and layers to this already complex discussion about identity.
This has been quite a journey. We've gone from questioning the biological basis of race, understanding its social and historical construction, to exploring the really complex, sensitive idea of transracial identity, comparing it to transgender identity, seeing the friction points.
And diving deep into the challenging case of Donna Briggs, seeing how society struggles with her asserted identity, asking if a black woman can become white in others' eyes.
And finally, grappling with the big ethical questions about appropriation, justice, and even what future technologies might mean for identity.
It's definitely clear there are no easy answers, no simple takeaways here.
Not at all. It really underscores that identity is, well, it's a process, isn't it? Fluid, evolving, not some fixed point we arrive at. Hopefully, exploring this encourages empathy, open thinking. Absolutely. And as you, our listener, continue to think about all this, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. What if technology advanced to the point where individuals could truly and seamlessly change their physical traits to align with any chosen racial identity? Would that lead to a more just, equitable world? Or could it somehow create entirely new, unforeseen kinds of division and inequality?